What is up, guys? This is Chili here, and today I'm going to be doing another tier list video, this time talking about all of the ranked teams maps that's currently in the Season 6 ranked team pool. I've got all of the, I think it's 9 maps that are currently in the pool listed over here, and I went ahead and manually added my own little dots here to represent what the player positionings look like when you're playing in a 4v4 context. So I'm going to be doing a tier list specifically covering which of these maps I most enjoy, most look forward to playing, and which of these maps, in my opinion, are just a complete snooze fest, and frankly, I'd like them to be reworked for 4v4 context. Now, I did do a poll recently asking you guys whether or not you guys play more team games or solo matches. It seems like there's currently a majority of players that like to play team games, with solo matches coming in second, and then in third place is people who don't play multiplayer at all. This was a little bit surprising to me because currently all of the content for AOE4, at least on YouTube that we see, is 1v1 matches among the pros. All the pro games mostly feature 1v1 matches. I think the game's balancing is also focused around 1v1 matches. So if there's so many people playing team games, it's kind of surprising to me that we have such little emphasis from the developers on balancing and making sure the team game maps are fun to play on. So here's my first attempt at ranking it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether or not you agree with what I have here, and we'll go ahead and get right into it. So first off is Dry Arabia. I'm so glad that this map is in the pool this time around. Oh, by the way, the way I'm going to rank these is at the very top is Always Good Time. Up next is I'll Guess I'll Play It. This is a bit like, all right, whatever. And then next is How Was This Not Banned? And then next is Auto Ban It. Every single time I see it, I'm going to ban it. And lastly, it's a water map. Now, I've made no secret of how I feel about water maps. I think AOE4, the way it's implemented water, is just not a good time. Especially for new players, there's already so many things to consider in this game, and there's already so much complexity going on. Adding water just adds another layer of complexity, and basically, if players know how to play water, then they get to completely trounce any players that don't know what they're doing on the water maps. And on top of that, there's just like balance issues with water maps and team games, especially because some people like playing water maps, all the pros seem to enjoy it for some reason, but on team games it's just straight up not balanced because some factions are better at water and than others, and a faction that's better at water, like, you don't know the positioning. So like, for instance, with Golden Heights, one side has water, one side does not. Let's say like the player 1 over here rolls HRE. This player is going to completely dominate water. HRE is a very traditionally strong water focused civ, or Japan, for instance. Japan's very strong on water right now. If this player is Japanese, then they get to build the ninjas, they get to stop the docks, they get to get those cheaper fishing ships. But if you have Japan on the complete other side of the map, and then this player, say like, I don't know, China or something like that, just like some other civ that's going to be weaker at water, now all of a sudden you're going to be screwed over because you couldn't pick the positionings of the civs that you wanted. So until you have that feature where you can actually plan out where each player is going to go, there's just a lot of balance issues currently with how water works. Anyways, we'll get all into that when we talk about that map as well. So let's go ahead and get into where Dry Arabia would place, where I would place Dry Arabia. Now, Dry Arabia is probably the most classic map in AOE4. In a 4v4 context, the layout looks roughly like this. You'll have players arranged in kind of a circular form where there's 2 players in the back, 2 players in the front, very close to their opponents. This is a good map, in my opinion. This is a classic map. It is the basically bog standard map of the Age of Empires series, I think. I think actually there was a map that was very popular for this in AOE2 as well. I wasn't an AOE2 player, so I wouldn't know for sure. Let me know in the comments if you know. But basically the way it works is like, it's got some trees, it's got some resources strewn about. There's not really any elevation or natural barriers to worry about aside from just forests. It's very, very standard, and as a result, it's also very open. So a lot of pretty much every civ can do something on this kind of map, and I think that most civs are balanced on this map. It's the standard land map. I don't have too many issues with it. I like that players are very close to each other, in that this creates a lot of opportunity for early aggression. I hate matches that tend to I hate maps that tend to lead to late game slogs where you just have two teams completely stalemated, just bashing each other's head in. Like, that is not a good time. The best maps are games where there's a lot of dynamism, especially in the early game. There's a lot of opportunity for early aggression and a lot of opportunity for teamwork. This is one of those maps, and so as a result, I will place it in Always a Good Time, although I'm going to place it a little bit lower on here because I suspect some of the other maps are going to be a little bit better, at least in my personal opinion. One thing that is a little bit maybe not the best about this map is that it heavily advantages cavalry type civs, like for instance the French or the Mongols, in that it's so open. In 4v4s, there's so much terrain that you need to cover. When you have cavalry units that can travel across the map faster, they can just make much more impact on the map and completely screw over your teammates even while you're struggling on the front lines. And also, the way that it's arranged leads to these, like, a 2v2 situation. Obviously, like, players 1 and 2 are much closer to players 5 and 6 than they are to 7 and 8. So it creates these, like, 2v2 scenarios that doesn't really encourage cross-map team play as much. So I would like to see games where your whole team can work together rather than just kind of splitting off into two sides. So overall, though, still really enjoying this map. A very classic map for AOE4. Up next is Cliffside. Now, okay. Cliffside is one of the new maps that we got with the Sultan's Ascend. It is a map that is very large, and the main feature is that you're positioned very close to the opponent's side. At least player 2 and player 7 here are actually relatively close to each other, but there is a big cliff, scraggly cliff with a lot of mountainous terrain, as well as a lot of pathways and openings right down in the middle. That's also where the sacred sites are. That's also where all the gold mines are. So with this map in 1v1s, you're basically right next to your opponent, save for those cliffs. So there's a lot of opportunities to build walls, to defend yourself, to create distance, while at the same time being physically very close to the other player. In team games, the map is just really big, and there's always a player in the far back, as well as players like player 3 here is in the far back, as well as players 1 and 4. They're also relatively outside of the range of contact. Usually there's just one player in the front that is gonna receive the brunt of the enemy's attention, so player 2 in this context, or player 7 on the enemy team, and it's not really fun being that player. And at the same time, if you have a civ that can hard boom or really take advantage of some greedy early game builds, so for instance like Ayubids, they can. I played a game recently. The Ayubid player was in the pocket. They were in the player 6 position, and they were able to fast Imperial completely naked within 11 minutes, and then after that they just ran over the game with unstoppable, unlimited camels, all the while we're struggling to aggress on their frontline players. So because of this, like, it's in my opinion really unbalanced. You can't figure out when your Ayubid player is going to be able to secure the pocket position like that. AOE4 doesn't have the ability, as I mentioned earlier, to select which position that you want to go in, so you can't really plan for comps, which is kind of taking away some of the strategical thinking within team games. So unfortunately, because of all this, and because this map is just so damn big and spread out, and you don't really get opportunities to work together, if like player 5 and player 8 will hardly interact, I do not think this is always a good time. Certainly, I think right now, given the current pool, I'm placing it in the I guess I'll play it section. It does still allow for, it's not as cancerous as some of the other maps that we'll discuss. I'll leave it here for now, and I'll see how I feel about it in a little bit. Now up next is Golden Heights. All right, now Golden Heights, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very asymmetrical map. This is the closest map actually to something like almost like a League of Legends or like a MOBA, where there's like 3 lanes. So at the top, this is like literally top lane right here. At the very top, player 4 and player 8 are just having a 1v1. This is a very secluded section. This cliffside basically means it's hard to interact for player 2 or player 6 to like go in and interact. For instance, they have to come in through the backside basically if they want to help out. So these two are just locked into 1v1. Now on the bottom, there's also another 1v1 happening between player 1 and player 5, and that's over the control of the water. Now this is the only area of water, and there's not too much fish here, but the player that is able to secure this water area will be able to get a massive advantage, and it's basically impossible once you've lost the water to get it back. So in this context here, they have to do a 1v1, and there's a 1v1 on top, and then in the center there's a lot of gold mines and stone mines, and this is where these middle players are expected to play. Now, this map has a lot of opportunity. Every time I play this map, it's actually not too bad. I like that each player has like a different role that they fulfill on the team. What I don't like is that you can't pick which civ goes in which position. So as a result, it gets randomized, and the player that might want to play water is all of a sudden in the pocket, or the player that might want to do that early aggression 1v1 style gameplay is instead positioned on the water, and then their civ is just not well designed for that matchup. There's a lot of issues with that, and as a result, in my opinion, this map has potential, but ultimately it can be really frustrating to play at times. Although this all being said, I don't hate it, so I actually am gonna put this. I think I'm gonna put this over here. I guess I'll play it. Actually, I actually like this map more than Cliffside, and this is coming from a player that does not like water. I actually think the water on this map is relatively manageable, so long as there was some ability to pick which player gets to go on the water. All right, up next is Golden Pit. Okay, so this map is new with the Sultan's Ascent expansion, and it's kind of reminiscent of some other maps in the game. Basically, we had like King of the Hill, for instance. It's kind of like reverse King of the Hill. King of the Hill, it has a big old hill in the middle. There's a single sacred site in the middle, and basically all the big mines are in the middle. So you basically want to control the middle. Now with this map, there's a lot of mines in the center. All the gold is basically in the center, and it's surrounded by a stealth forest, which is a very annoying stealth forest. It always fucks with your trebuchets attacks and stuff like that. I wish they would fix that bug where your trebuchets don't attack the moment they lose sight. So that's already kind of an annoying feature of this map. There's some weird things on this map, like the biggest weird thing is that there's no neutral trade post. I think it's to emphasize that there is this kind of like golden pit that you're supposed to compete for in the center. The issue though is that a lot of civs in this game are designed for trading, and on top of that, and even rely on the neutral trade posts. As an example, if you're the Byzantines, you get advantages if you can build your mercenary camp next to the neutral trade post. So to just randomly take that feature of that civ away from them for the sake of the map is a little bit strange. And on top of that, in team game contexts, you can just trade with your teammates. So in a 1v1 context, not having a neutral trade post kind of makes sense because it forces this play into the center. But in a team game, you don't actually have to play that game. You can just trade with your allies, and you completely negate that need at all. So this map wasn't well thought through for the context of larger team games, and on top of that, it again leads to this natural positioning where there's 2v2s happening just because it's a circular positioning. I do not like this map, and it is always coming up in the queue for me. So eventually I actually banned it just because I'm so tired of seeing this map. This is a map that I'm placing in. How was this not banned? The first one that we'll put in that category. Up next is Gorge. All right, some of you guys might have seen my Reddit post on this, so spoiler if you have. But this map is my favorite map in the game. My favorite team map in the game. I'm just gonna say it right there. The reason why I drew this map so differently compared to the other maps is because it plays so differently in the team context compared to the other maps. Now in a 1v1 situation, you have one player on the south, one player on the north, and that's it, and they're just fighting each other. It's relatively bog standard. The central area is like this valley, and all the resources are on their side. That's kind of what's interesting in the 1v1 context. In the 4v4 context, the developers did something really interesting in my opinion, which is that instead of most maps with a layout like this, they would just have 1, 2, 3, 4 laid out horizontally on the bottom here, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 laid out horizontally on the top there. This is kind of like the pit or Altai, where you just have players lined up in a horizontal like equal sign. Instead, in this case, they did a vertical stack with the player positioning. So 1, 2, and 3, and 4 all get stacked vertically, very close to each other, and 1 and 5 are very close to each other as well. So basically, 1, you move outside of your base just a little bit, and all of a sudden you're within TC range of player 5's base. This is awesome. What this means is that players naturally have to work together because player 5 and player 1 are in such a precarious position that they're always going to be contesting the central area. If they don't get assistance from their teammates, they're going to lose that, and the moment player 5 starts crumbling, player 6 is right next to them, so they're going to start falling next, and then 7 and 8 and so on. And what this does is that it creates these game scenarios where you just have, like, you know, players are working together, pushing back and forth in the middle, and then eventually one team starts to fall, and then like you'll do a slow siege as you crawl up through 5, 6, 7, and 8 spaces, which is really cool, and it forces players to work together. Another really cool thing about this map in team game context is that the players actually share the same resources. So they might have wood lines that are right in between each other, or a giant gold mine that's right in between each other, or even deer that's right next to each other. So because of this, if let's say I'm player 3 and player 2 is getting raided, I will feel that as player 3 because that's my gold line as well. That's also my wood line. So I'm actually forced to see what my teammates are dealing with and also have to address that myself. In many of these other maps, like let's say for instance like Golden Heights, like player 1 and player 4 basically are playing their own games. It's like they never interact. There's almost never an opportunity where these two will see each other because the map is just so big and there's just so many, they have their own problems to deal with. I will never, if I'm player 1, I will never look at what's going on in player 4's side, unless they're telling me that their base is being lost. I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, let's surrender, because there's nothing I can do to impact that. But if I'm player 1 in this situation, like I care about what's happening to player 4. If player 4 is getting raided, that affects my situation as well. If I'm player 4 and player 1's base is falling down, that affects my situation as well. So because of this, it's like your teams are forced to work together. This is why I really love this map, and I'll probably be doing a full video on this map, just dissecting it and showing you guys why this is the best map in the game. I highly recommend for everyone that is banning this map, do not ban this map. This is such a good map. It's maybe difficult to play in a uncoordinated team context. If you're with a bunch of randos and you guys aren't able to work together, then I can see how it could be kind of frustrating. But in a coordinated team context, it's created some of the best games I've ever played in this game, just because it's just everyone's working together, and that's what I want in a team context. All right, let's go on to Hidden Valley. All right, now Hidden Valley Hidden Valley is basically Gorge if they did everything wrong. This is what Gorge would have been if they followed the same box standard design philosophy, which is the equal sign. Two I guess horizontal stacks. In this case, they're vertical stacks, but you get what I'm saying. They're just like parallel lines across from each other. The map is super big. There's a big amount of open terrain in between them, which means that by the time, let's say you're trying to do like a feudal era rush, by the time you get to play, I'm player 1, I'm walking my longbows across the map. By the time I get to player 5, he's already hit Castle Age, he's already grabbing relics. Like, the map is just so damn big that you basically can't have any kind of early aggression, coordinated early aggression. It can be really difficult, and so this naturally trends towards booming. It's very easy to set up trade on this map. There's a lot of open space in the back. It's not very easy to wall up, but because the open space here is so big, but it does naturally tend to just have a giant wall up in the center. Both sides are just basically walling up, so they don't have to deal with raids. And of course, like late game, what happens is one of the players breaks through, they get their Keshiks in, they get their Mangadai in, they get their Knights in, and then basically start raiding your trade, and then that's the team that will eventually lose. It's just a very painful thing to play. And it just drags. So if it doesn't drag super long, then it just becomes, actually, what am I saying? If you play on this map, it will drag. This is gonna guaranteed at least a 25-minute game, if not a 40 to 50-minute game on something like this. Same thing goes for this center area. This map does not have a lot of forest. Or at least the trees next to you are very sparse. You're encouraged to go towards the center, this this Mohawk area here. Cut down these trees and then potentially open up a third lane of access here. It's not as compelling as maybe the devs thought it would be. It's also really stupid that sheep will spawn in this central area, which means that sometimes if you roll poorly, you'll just have less sheep. And some civs are more reliant on sheep than others, so that is a natural disadvantage to them because you can't access that sheep until the end of the game, or until the mid to end game. So it's just, there's a lot of oversights here, and I do not like this map. This is a very poorly designed map in my opinion. 1v1 contexts are a little bit different. It kind of plays very similar to Gorge in a 1v1 context. Alright, Hideout. I like Hideout a lot. Hideout is always a good time. I don't know if you saw the trend yet, but Hideout is nice because even though it does split into two 2v2s, so 1 and 2 will naturally fight 5 and 6 in this context, 3 and 4 will fight 8 and 7. Even though that does tend to happen, what's cool about this map is that there is a lot of opportunity for early aggression. 4 and 8 are very close to each other, and so they can play into they can play into each other. They can do early feudal raids. They can do full-on all-ins early on. There is some things that makes it a little bit worse. Like, how do I say this? If a map was to be two 2v2s, I think Hideout and Dry Arabia do it pretty well because players are positioned close enough together that they can do some early game aggression, and it makes the game really interesting. But the problem with Hideout is that you are in a little cubby within your tree line, and as a result, if you get holed up in your cubby, you don't have access to any of the resources out here. All of the gold and stone is out on the map, and so a player that is cheesing, and if you don't know how to deal with that cheese, let's say you get tower rushed or you get you just get boxed in early by, let's say, 3 players go to one side and just force you to play inside your base. If you don't know how to deal with that, and if your team doesn't know how to react to that, you just lose automatically, basically. So that is one area of this map that's a little bit not the ideal. It does get cheesy sometimes, but if you do learn how to play against that cheese, if your team knows how to adapt to those situations, it's very, very playable. There is counterplay. You just have to know what to do. In my opinion, adding that burden of knowledge to players to learn how to play on this map specifically is a bit too much for new players, and I don't like overburdening new players when there's so many other things going on in this game already. So for that reason, it's not quite as good as, say, Gorge, but otherwise I do enjoy this map. Every single time I play this map, I'm excited and I have a good time. Almost always guarantees a fun map. Also, like the walls that you want to set up are pretty obvious, and the areas of aggression are pretty obvious. Like, that's another thing that I haven't mentioned yet. Like, with a lot of these maps, they're 4v4s are so big, and because the map is so big, like RTSs, you're trying to micromanage like a million things all at once, and when the map is that big and there's that many players, there's that many units going on everywhere, it's just chaos. You don't know where to look, you don't know where to focus on. Maps that focus things into like a couple centralized areas of conflict are much better, in my opinion, because it forces you to it forces everyone to work together and focus on the same areas rather than just being dispersed everywhere and you just hear pings going all over your map. The latter is like torture when you just have pings everywhere. The former is fun when I can just focus on a centralized area and just like compete for that space. So that's one of the reasons why Gorge is so good, because the central area is the main area they're competing for. Yes, there's opportunity to raid on the side, but most of the combat is going to happen in the central area. Hideout, most of the combat is going to happen in the choke points between the two teams. Dry Arabia, for that reason, is not, in my opinion, as good because it's so open that there's not any point of interest that's going to be a central focus. It's just going to be kind of everywhere. All right, let's move on to the last 2 maps. Himeyama. Okay. Himeyama is, in my opinion, not a good map. I don't think this is an auto ban, though. I'm going to put this in, how is this not banned? It is very similar to, let's say, Dry Arabia in the positioning. All the players are just kind of arranged in a circular form, but it's very resource sparse compared to Dry Arabia. I think the tree lines are a little bit smaller, if I recall correctly. The hill that you spawn on is not that meaningful, and then the pond in the center is also in a 1v1 context. That pond is accessible within age 1 because you're not too far away from it. You could set up a dock there and do something interesting with that pond. I don't like water, but it is available to you. In a 4v4 context, the map is so damn big that getting villagers to walk towards the center and setting up something there, and you're actually open to so much potential aggression from all different sides, all different players, it's just not worth it. So what happens in a 4v4 context is that no one really plays on the water. It's not actually a interesting feature for this map. It's just a hole in the center. That's it. If a player does go there, it's either not worth it because they walk their villagers so damn long, or it's kind of a suicide mission because they're just going to die from any kind of early aggression that happens, any kind of coordinated early aggression that happens. So instead what happens is you're just playing the standard Dry Arabia, where it's a 2v2 on one side and 2v2 on the other side. which is just kind of boring. It's just Dry Arabia but worse. So I would really like it if they kind of went back to the drawing board and rethought what they did with what to do with this map. Perhaps they could instead, if they were to make this a 2v2 type of map, or two 2v2s type of map, they could position the water in between the players on the sides instead. Perhaps that could make it interesting. The water could be something that players could actually contest. Perhaps, I don't know. That could make it more fun to play. Perhaps. All right, and let's go on to the last one. Volcanic Island. It's a water map. I'm sorry. I do not like water maps. Water. I'll make a video where I go into this in depth someday. But water is just not well designed in this game. And this map it's surrounded by water. It kind of plays similar to Hideout in that there's a central, I think like a forest or some kind of impassable terrain in the center, and then all the players kind of strewn next to it. You could potentially early aggress. It does again form into 2v2s, which again is really boring because player 1 and player 4 don't really interact. So it has all those pitfalls, but it's also a water map, and the team that knows how to play water basically wins the game. And if you're a team that doesn't know how to play water or can't be bothered, it's just, I don't know, there's too many pings going on in this map when you're playing it. It's just too big. Everything's happening all over the place and you can't focus, and it feels like torture. It feels like you're getting tortured. So yeah, screw that map. All right, overall, not a terrible roster for this season of maps. There's no maps that I would include in the autoban category, which is a really good sign. And there's 3 maps that I think are always a good time. So I'm always rooting for these 3 maps. Unfortunately, most of my games seem to be on Cliffside and Hidden Valley and Himeyama. I get these maps all the fucking time. I don't know why are you guys banning these top 3 maps? Is that why? Like, why is no one banning these maps? Are like the meh whatever maps. Like, it's not worth banning, but it's also not worth rooting for. So maybe that's why these maps are there. I don't know. I hope that more of you guys will open up Gorge and Hideout especially, and you know, let's do a match on those. I love Gorge so much. I might even do like a my own tournament around this map. I would love to see coordinated teams that are practiced, that know how to play this map, go up against each other. I would love to shoutcast that. That'd be so much fun. All right, well, that's my little tier list here. Let me know what you think, and let me know what you would rank these different maps. Which maps do you like? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, that's all from me. Stay frosty out there, stay chilly.